One of the most challenging negotiations that I've been confronted with is a negotiation I had in the course of mediating between President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela and his political opposition at a time in the early 2000s when a lot of international observers were afraid that Venezuela was going to tip into the kind of political violence that bedevils its neighbor, Colombia. And so the tensions were high. There were mass demonstrations. There was some violence. There'd been a coup d'etat reversed. It was a very tough situation. And at one point, I went in and I had an appointment with the president at his palace. And it was at 9 o'clock. So I'm waiting there, and 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Finally, at midnight, I'm ushered into the president's office thinking I'm going to go in for a one-on-one, and I'm there with his entire cabinet behind him. And I'd been speaking to some of his ministers earlier, and so I said to him, I congratulated him. I said, Mr. President, it seems like things are improving a little bit between you and the political opposition. It seems like we're making some progress. And he took that as a cue to say, what do you mean we're making progress? Those SOP, he really got into a fury, and you neutrals are being fooled blind. You're not seeing what they're doing. He kind of leaned into my face, and for an hour, threw a temper tantrum, was in a rage. And I was sitting there wondering what I'm supposed to do, because he's attacked. I'm feeling personally attacked. That's the situation. So what I did was, what I do in those situations, sometimes I like to pinch my palm just to stay cool, stay steady, remember why you're here. Because I realized that if I just got defensive and started, replying in kind, wasn't going to serve my purpose, wasn't going to advance the process. It didn't serve me in any way to get into a shouting match with the president. So I waited, and I didn't react. And after an hour, suddenly he kind of calms down, and he turns to me and in a very kind of resigned and somewhat exasperated voice says, "So, Yuri, what should I do?" And then that was my moment. I was ready. I'd come with a proposal to say, hey, this is Christmas. Let's have a cooling off truce. Everyone take some time out. Let the people relax and have a nice holiday, and get cool minds, and then we can focus in on the problem. And at the end, he was inviting me to go on a tour of Venezuela with him. Very amicable, very amicable. And what I learned from that is that one of the greatest powers that you have in negotiation is the power of not reacting. I mean, human beings are reaction machines. As Ambrose Bierce once put it, when angry, you will make the best speech you will ever regret. And we often do that, whether that's in the boardroom or the office cooler. We lose it. We lose it. And in negotiation in particular, where we're trying to advance our interests, the single biggest barrier isn't the other side. It turns out to be us. It's our own natural human reactions, which is why it's so important not to react, but instead, I like to use the metaphor of going to the balcony. In other words, take a step back from the situation. Imagine you're negotiating on a stage. Part of your mind goes up to a mental balcony, some place overlooking the stage where you can get some perspective. You can see what's really going on. You can keep your eyes on the prize. What are my real objectives in this negotiation? Whether I'm negotiating with a tough client or a tough boss or a tough colleague, what are my real objectives here, and how can I best advance them? Keep your eyes on the prize so that you don't get mad, you don't get even, you get what you want.